Everyone. Thank you for choosing to join us for the fourth of our series of CARE webinars. Today's session is on empowering students remotely. I'm going to let you know ahead of time that I'm working from home also, and my beagle is right next to me. And she is chasing rabbits in her dreams right now, so you may hear her in the background. And when the mail lady comes, my other dog will lose his mind, so don't be put off by that. Before we begin, let me thank you all for everything that you do for your students every single day. And our thanks is not just for what you've been doing during this time of the crisis, but every day of the school year. I just want you to know how much we appreciate all of you. For those of you who are attending all four webinars, you can earn a micro-credential certificate in innovative remote teaching practices with civics mindedness, and Illinois teachers can also receive CPDUs. Dr. Donna Keel will be filling you in a little bit more on that at the end of this webinar. And sources that we're using, many of them are from the Library of Congress and Teaching with Primary Sources. We want to thank CitizenU and Our American Voice and DePaul University for making these webinars possible. By way of introduction, I'm John Fontanetta, and I'm the program director for the Our American Voice Civics Education Program. I was also formerly a principal at a K-6 elementary school in South Berwyn, District 100, and a middle school principal in the same district at Heritage Middle School. And then I was also a former middle school social studies teacher for many years in both the Archdiocese of Chicago's Catholic system and also in the public system in Berwyn. And now I'm also a adjunct faculty member at DePaul University. Now, if you've been a part of our previous webinars, you know why I'm so proud to work with the two women who are going to be introducing themselves to you. I learn something from them every time I speak with them, and unfortunately, they are an impossible act to follow, but I'm going to do my best. So, Dr. Keel, could you introduce yourself to everybody?
Yeah, thank you so much, John. You know, it's definitely an honor to be working along John and Susie, who you'll meet in a second. And really, we always save the best for last. So we put you in the hands of one of the most amazing educators I've ever had the honor to know. And for me, I'm Dr. Donna Keel. I'm a faculty member at DePaul University in our educational leadership program. And I also teach in our teacher preparation program. I get my credibility because I was in the field. So I was a former school principal and a K-12 school teacher and counselor, and taught social studies, and almost all of my career served mostly at-risk students in very marginalized communities. So my research love and areas of expertise are in emotional intelligence, social emotional competencies, and a bunch of things around teaching and learning so that we connect the heart of the teacher with the courageous act of teaching. So we're really happy to be here today. Glad that you're spending this afternoon with us. And I know that you'll gain so much from John, and I look forward to supporting you along this journey. And I'll swing it over to Susie.
Okay. And I am so lucky to work with my two wonderful colleagues. Tell you a little bit about myself and we'll turn it back to John. I am a former elementary and special education teacher, a little bit of assessment specialist in there mixed in. I've been in on the early aspects of Our American Voice. I was the Civic Capitalism Program Manager for middle school and high school students. And I also these days work as a professional learning facilitator for Lexia Learning. And I have served as adjunct professors for in-service teachers. I'm going to turn it right back over to John.
Thank you, Susie and Donna. So our aims for today's webinar are these. So we'd like to identify some problems that remote learning has given us, explore some keys to empowering students, look at some proven strategies for doing that empowerment. We want to be able to use inquiry to increase motivation. We're also going to be looking at a lesson or two that directly does empower the student. We want to explore a little bit creativity as an assessment in remote learning, and also take a look at how you might be able to use choice boards in order to engage your students. If you are able, I'd like you to maybe grab a paper and a pen to have next to you. During this time, I'll be asking you to jot a couple of things down. You could put it in the chat box also, but one of the reasons why I'd like you to jot it down maybe on a piece of paper is that you might want to refer back to it maybe when you're doing your lesson plans. And I'm not sure you'll have the webinar up and running while you do that. So maybe you can refer back to it, because the number one aim not listed up here for any PD or webinar that I do is I want you to be able to say that you took at least one thing away from what we do today, our discussion, and are able to apply it right away tomorrow. And if tomorrow means you're working on your lesson plans for next week, or you're actually going to apply it in a class that you're teaching tomorrow, that's really the goal that would make me the most happy. In order to talk about empowerment, it'd be wise for us to have a definition of it. So here's a definition that would work well for our purposes. Empowerment is the process of becoming stronger and more confident, especially in controlling one's life and claiming one's rights. The part of this definition that strikes me the most is the part that says controlling one's life, because right now, that's kind of what we're all trying to do. The situation that we find us in is one that often leaves us feeling like we're not in control of much of anything these days. And so our kids feel that way too. And so we want to seek some ways where they can feel like they are gaining some more control. The other part about being out of control, the way it manifests itself is, I heard, I was listening to a news broadcast and they said that the whole idea of hoarding toilet paper and now maybe coming into the future hoarding meat products, a lot of that goes to the feeling of being out of control in our lives. And if we can't control the major things, this is one area that we can control. So maybe we can help our students out by going down that path. David Hughes has a fantastic TED Talk on 5 keys to empower students. I have the link up here. I'm not going to play it for you for the sake of time, but I'm just going to highlight some of his main points. But I encourage you to go ahead and listen to his powerful delivery of it. So what he says is that there are 5 keys to empowering students. The first one is time. And he talks about trying to empower his own little 2-year-old child who insisted on putting on her own coat herself. And if you're a parent, you've probably been down this road, whether it's putting on your own coat or putting your shoes on the wrong way. I don't know how it's 100% on the wrong foot. And you're in a hurry to get somewhere and they just need to do that themselves. And what he said is, what we need to do if we're going to empower students is to give them time. And as we're thinking about our lessons and the things we're asking them to do, having ample amount of time is really important. The other thing, and I talk about getting the shoes on the wrong feet, is we have to allow for failure. And that's a really difficult thing for us as educators, because you know, there are even going to be some kids in this new learning environment that are normally really great students and don't fail at anything, that under these new circumstances are going to fail. We have to have trust, he says. And that speaks to a little bit of what's going on at home when I send out that assignment, or when I check in and I have no idea whether they're doing it, whether they're, you know, if they logged on, whether they just logged on and they're not even engaging in anything that I do. And he said that in order to empower our students, we really have to learn how to trust them. The fourth key is to support them. And he said, but this is really a tricky balancing act, because you want to support while you're empowering, but you don't want to take over. So that's kind of a balancing act that we all seek to find. He kind of alludes to it being sort of like going with your child and shooting a bow and arrow, where you can hold the bow, but they actually have to point it and pull back the string. The fifth one that he says is really, really important is to celebrate, and to celebrate even the smallest of achievements. Because in order for our students to really feel like they're being successful in these times, they really need to hear us celebrate. Now, we know that all of these apply to our students. What I'd like you to do is, on your with your pen on your paper, I'd like you to choose, of these 5, one of these keys that you feel like you've done a really good job with in these recent weeks, and just write down one of the keys that you think if there's anything that you've done well, this is it. You could also type it in the chat box if you would like to. I'm seeing a lot of support. That's great. Now that you've made that choice, I'd like you to go back there and say, if there's one thing here that you think you would like to improve on, write down in your notes under improvement, and you could also put that in the chat box. Which of these 5 do you think you could really focus on improving? So now, when you're thinking about creating your lessons going forward, don't forget about the things that you do well and continue to do them, and maybe even expand them a little bit. But also, as you're creating your lesson, think about how you might want to address one of the other 5 keys in a way. And I'm going to empower you in the future by giving you some time and letting you fail in your quest. And I trust that you will do this. And if you need some support, we're going to give you a chance at the end of this webinar to talk when we're finished, and we can have a discussion on some of those things, and we'll certainly celebrate that. I also want to point out that I really truly hope that your administrators are empowering you in these same ways. There are some proven strategies for empowering students, and I'd like to share some of you that come from Southeastern University. One of the key strategies is to let students lead. And again, that's a challenge when students are not right there in front of you. But you want to figure out ways to let students lead. Asking students for feedback. And this is probably even more important now than in the classroom itself, because in the classroom itself, you get feedback visually. You just look at your students' eyes, you look at their body language, and you can tell whether they're getting something, whether they're enjoying it, or whether it's really difficult or it's not holding their interest. So asking them and having a regular formal way that you ask them for feedback is important. Finding ways to incorporate self-assessment for kids. Giving them opportunities to demonstrate their understanding of material in a way that fits them best. Prioritizing real-world applications. Right now, it's difficult because not a lot of things seem important except for that big bugaboo that's right in our face every minute. And so trying to find some real-world applications for the things that kids are doing and making those connections is important. Encouraging students to share their work with an audience, and not necessarily you as the audience all the time, but how can they share their work with a family member? How can they share their work with other students in your class? And that can be very informal. It could be with permission from parents, a phone call to a classmate where they share their answers after they've done them, or even they even work on them together. And if they create some really wonderful personal ways to demonstrate their understanding, sharing that with others also. And again, we talk about giving students choices, which is the most powerful way to empower them. There's 6 strategies, but I added on a 7th after our last PD webinar, because somebody mentioned about empowering parents, and that really struck me. I think that this is a situation that we're in now where the role of the parents surely is dynamically changed in education than it was before. And so I think that looking for opportunities for asking parents, what would you like to see kids working on? Is there a way that you would like to have something presented to your child? And you may get some really great ideas. I think most importantly would be asking parents, what do you think your child would have the most fun with in demonstrating their understanding? What do you think they would like to do? Because I want to offer them as many opportunities to be themselves. Quickly, here's some tips for getting students to respond independently. And again, many of these things are not any different than you would do with a lesson in front of them in a normal situation. But it's good to remind ourselves, particularly in these situations. So start with an attention getter, and remotely, it's really important to start with something that isn't a long period of instruction from the teacher, like videotaping yourself for 10 minutes, telling them what they're going to do, or a long presentation, and trying to get them started with something that doesn't need a whole lot of directions to get started. To that purpose, primary source pictures, stories, songs, or short text are great ways to start lessons, and we'll be demonstrating that a little bit later. When they're looking at a picture or looking at a primary source, let them have a foundation for analyzing it, not just look at the picture. They need to have more specific things to do while they're analyzing. Model the procedure. Again, just great teaching, but make sure you spend a good deal of time before letting them know. If you're not on with them live, give them an example of what it would look like, a possible way that it might look. Set some small goals for meeting expectations. Where you used to need 10, now maybe you only need 5. And make sure that you're really expanding the time that you're allowing them to do. Be sure to compliment all responses. And then go the extra mile for acknowledging higher level thinking. But any responses is in this day and age should be celebrated just because we're worried about kids even being engaged. And again, offer choice as much as possible, and choice in a way that lets them demonstrate their own abilities. Finally, when we're talking about the workload, this is really important. And I know that you know this as a teacher. If you're a parent with students at home, you know it too. I have daughters with grandchildren at home, and the workload is really important. I want to show you a chart about maximum times of focused learning for age groups. So if you're looking at pre-K to kindergarten, 15 to 20 minutes is their max for focused learning. And I know this is true because when I was a principal and I would go into a kindergarten classroom or even a first or second grade classroom, I was always amazed, having been a middle school teacher, that they were changing up every 15 or 20 minutes what they were doing. And the amount of preparation that it took, I always admired primary school teachers for the amount of preparation it takes for them to do that. As a middle school teacher, when it says about 30 minutes for focused learning, well, our classes were 40 minutes long, which meant 30 minutes after that, I was probably kind of pushing it unless I changed up what we were doing. And then on to the upper grades, 45 minutes for grades 4 to 8, which would be pretty much into the middle school area, and then high school an hour. But the thing to remember is if your kids see more than one teacher, be aware when you're planning with your colleagues, if you can, that this is the focused learning for one exercise, for one activity. So you have to be careful about piling on from numerous teachers. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a look at the CitizenU website. And this website is one that's rich in inquiry-based lessons. It uses primary sources to connect civics learning to social studies, but also to language arts, math, and science. If you're with us at the previous webinar, Susie took you through one of the lessons that was linked to math. These are great lessons. They have an interdisciplinary aspect to them so that they can lead to planning with your teaching partners. So it could be a social studies and a reading lesson together, a social studies and a language arts lesson together, a social studies and math. And the beauty of that is if you have an opportunity to plan together, that lightens the load a little bit on you. The link is here to CitizenU. I'm not going to go to the link right now for the sake of time, but we are going to take a look at a lesson. The lesson that I chose to look at today is called News, Perspective, and Bias. The objective is to get students critically thinking about perceptions of events that can be shaped by the storyteller, and then the importance of looking at things from different perspectives, and also understanding that what biases may be involved. Obviously, this is a lesson that is not difficult to link to reality in our everyday situations. Now, when we talk about primary sources, one of the things that we're talking about is being able to engage kids and empower them. Often when we talk about primary sources, at least as a social studies teacher in years past, I always thought about them as reading the actual Declaration of Independence or the Constitution or a letter from George Washington, which are all great primary sources. The difficulty with that was the variance of reading levels in my class and reading language that's not familiar to kids in this day and age. But my world really opened up when I started thinking about primary sources, also in the way of looking at pictures. So we don't want to toss out that option just because some of our students might have difficulty reading independent or without guidance. One of the things that I've witnessed with primary sources is it doesn't matter if you're teaching a class of gifted students, students that have IEPs, students that are second language learners. If you put a picture down in front of them, it really levels the playing field for everybody, and it gives everybody an opportunity to contribute. Now, this lesson that we're talking about now on bias and perspective starts with the true story of the Three Little Pigs, and I have put the link here for that story. We're not going to watch it, but if you click on that link, it will take you to a read of that story. And you may be familiar with it, but it's the classic Three Little Pigs story from the eyes of the wolf. So one of the things that you can do here after having that story read from a YouTube reading is ask these questions of students. So now they've listened to a story that they didn't have to read. They can get engaged in it right away, and now they should be able to start to think about these questions. In looking at pictures, the Library of Congress analysis tool is amazing. Susie referred to it last webinar, but I wanted to be sure that you got to look at it. If you've never used this when looking at a primary source, I really encourage you to go ahead and do so. It'll take a little bit of time for it to load up. If you go to the Library of Congress's website and just type in primary source analysis tool, this will come up. And this is an interactive tool, so you can share it with kids in this manner, and they can share their answers back with you. So when you look at this analysis tool, You can choose a format. So if you're looking at a picture or a movie or a song, you're analyzing a song, you can use this tool. Give it to the students. Now, last time Susie referred to, I observe, I reflect, and I question. And those are great. I go, and she mentioned, I see, I think, I wonder, because it flows more smoothly for students. If your students are stuck on what they see, they think, or they wonder, they can click on here and it'll give them a prompt. What did you notice first? Find something small but interesting. So there's prompts for each of the sections. Where do you think this came from? Why did somebody make it? What do you think was happening when it made? And then the last one is all the who, what, why, when questions. And they can also fill in at the bottom what they would like to investigate further. It's a tremendous tool to use when you're having kids work on their own analyzing. But here's the link to the Library of Congress. Here's directly to the primary source analysis tool. The source also gives, the lesson also gives another worksheet that is really just the who, what, when, why. And you can offer students either of the two worksheets or graphic organizers to get their thoughts together. So the primary source activity in this lesson involves the Boston Massacre. So what they're going to see is two paintings of the Boston Massacre. This is the one that most people are familiar with, the one that was purchased by Paul Revere and circulated in the colonies. And this one here is another painting by another artist depicting the same event. What you would like to do is have the students analyze the picture and say, I see, I think, I wonder, for each of these. Now in the classroom, you would give maybe this one to one group and the second one to another group. And I don't know if you have the ability in your connection with your students to divide them in groups, but that's a good idea also. When they're saying, I see, I think, I wonder, a good direction is, I see is what you can point to. So I don't see people being angry. I see soldiers. I think they're angry. I wonder why. If you take them through that process, they will be able to fill in the columns a little easier. After you do all of that and have them do that, they could do a Venn diagram in which what is common to both of the paintings and what is significant or different to each of them. One thing that we want to point out as we're going along is that these are paintings, not photographs, and neither of the artists were there at the event. So as we're trying to get to the idea of bias and perspective, that's an important point. In terms of checking for understanding, here are some questions that students can answer. What caused the fight? Who was fighting? When did the fight occur? What picture do you believe? Which side would you defend at a trial? In the lesson on CitizenU, there are links to go to articles to be read. If that reading level becomes difficult, you can simply say to your students, do a Google search on Boston Massacre and see if you can find any of these answers, and by looking at the pictures, and also giving them the choice of either writing or recording their answers on their cell phone. When you're assessing, I think it's a great idea to assess the big concept, not looking for the exact correct answer of maybe where the Boston Massacre took place or how many people were there or who, what was the result of the trial. What I'm looking for in here is the big concept of the same event being interpreted two different ways. And here, talk to an adult or a classmate and find out how news events in your own area could be interpreted in two different ways. Why is it important to have multiple perspectives? Think about a situation in your own life when you didn't consider the perspectives of another. Maybe record an interview and pretend you're a soldier or a patriot, and you have to tell how you feel from each side. And again, giving students choice. Albert Einstein said, creativity is intelligence having fun. And what I'd like to do is share with you something that's a little bit personal for me, because this is a video that was made by my granddaughter, who's in 3rd grade. And she had an assignment from her teacher remotely to look up a national monument and to write an essay about the monument and tell some important facts. And then they were given the opportunity to draw a picture. They were given a couple of choices of how to relate it on top of their essay. Well, my granddaughter sent me a text message the next day and sent me this.
You know that the Statue of Liberty shows a friendship between France and America? Liberty was built on Ellis Island for immigrants to see. Americans designed the pedestal on the statue.
Now, the reason I showed you that was not to show off my granddaughter, although that's not the worst reason in the world. The reason I did was when I saw that, I said to her how great it was. It was easy to celebrate it. And I said, you know what, I'm doing a webinar for teachers. There's going to be a lot of teachers on it, and I'm going to show them this video. And she said, no way, you're not. And I said, yeah, I am, because it's a great way to show what you learned. And I know you're going to remember these things long after the essay that you wrote. And she said to my daughter the next day, Papa's really not going to show that to those teachers. And she said, well, ask them. And I said, no, it's already in the webinar. And I wanted to show it because I wanted to illustrate the power of giving kids choice. She loves to make videos. She loves to do those kinds of things. So tap into those resources. If you wanted to do a lesson on your own, here's an example of one that I did with a 5th grade class. I showed them this picture. You can type in the chat box just yes or no if you know what this picture is. Okay, I'm glad to see some no's. This may be a little bit age related. What do you see? I see somebody laying down. I think they're injured. I see a person kneeling beside them. I think that she's upset. I see people walking in the background. I think that they're not paying much attention to what's going on. So yeah, some people have already typed in that this is Kent State. Now, before I tell them what it is, these 5th graders, I played them the song Ohio by Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. The first line is Tin Soldiers and Nixon coming. We're finally on our own. This summer I hear the drumming, 4 dead in Ohio. And I have them highlight the words in that song that seem to stick out. I haven't told them what this is about yet. Then I said, well, go ahead and you can do a little bit of an internet search if you want to search those words. So kids would put in Nixon, put in Ohio, and all of a sudden, here comes Kent State. And now they're able to go ahead and start to investigate what that is all about. But the beauty of this is now they can investigate what they want to know about the Vietnam War. So they could choose to investigate the actual war, the battles. They could investigate Nixon. They could take a look at protesting and what has protesting meant in our country and what have been some of the results of protesting. They could, if they're musically inclined, they could investigate how songs have really impacted our society. So what it does is it gives them a rich way to approach this without telling them this is what we're going to do. The last thing I want to talk about is putting together a choice board. And I've linked an article that Donna sent to me about how to put together really great choice boards. We been creating one every couple of weeks for OAV with choices that students can do in order to connect them with civics remotely. And some of them are really easy, simple. Some of them are a little bit more involved. But again, as a teacher, for any subject, you could create a choice board. Give that over a period of time, 2 weeks. Allow them to do any one they want, or say, I'd like one from each of the rows. I'd like one from each of the columns. You can highlight them in terms of difficulty. This is an easy one. This is a medium one. This is a hard one, and say, I'd like to have you do one of each. As we're going through all of this in these times, there's just, in closing, something that I'd like you to remember. Start by doing what is necessary. We're all just in the beginning of this. Then do what is possible. And finally, suddenly you're going to be doing the impossible. And those are the words of St. Francis of Assisi.
Okay.
And I wish those for you. And in closing, Dr. Keel, would you like to take them through some of the specifics?
Yeah, so thanks so much, John. Actually, John, that was phenomenal. You did an incredible job. Thank you. If you're interested in getting CPDUs, you definitely, we will send you the link for CPDUs. If you're pursuing the certificate, and this is the 4th webinar in the series, all you need to do for this webinar is just a 200-word essay on which practices that John shared that you would be integrating into your teaching and why you think so. This recording will be posted right away on the Citizen U website, and also along with this slide deck, so that you can go back and check that YouTube link out with the TED Talk that John showed and everything else. Thanks, John.
Well, thank you to everybody. I apologize for going a little bit over. I knew it was going to happen, even though I tried my best. But again, my true hope is that you've gained at least one thing to apply going forward, and then maybe adding on as you go along. So that concludes the actual presentation of the webinar. But now is the time where we're able to open it up for comments or questions or any kind of feedback that you'd like to give us. And that could be either orally by unmuting yourself or in the chat box.
Susie, I had a question for you. This is Catherine Lyon. Excuse me. John, I really liked your daughter's video, and that actually just got me sparked to trigger the picture that Susie has behind her. And we're studying Chicago right now. And I think that comparison, Susie, you have of Wrigley Field and a symbol of the United States, combined, something that like John's granddaughter did. I would love to incorporate that. I wondered, is that a personal photo or is that something you found online?
You just made my day. You can have it. I took that picture and it gets a little bit better. That is where my tickets are. I love my seats.
Wow.
It's my happy place. And because I always ask my season ticket holder guy for extra things for kids, he knew I was teaching and all that kind of a thing. On the 4th of July, he called me up and he said, hey, do you want to be down there on the field this year? So the next year I was down there on the field with citizens from the community and soldiers from every branch.
Wow.
It was just incredible. So yes, you can have it. I love that picture.
That, I think that's a great, as I said, what John just said, and then to put that comparison in for the kids in our Chicago unit right now. Wow, how powerful is that?
Yeah, you got it. You got it. I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled. Hey, speaking of that with the flag and all that, the picture that John showed of Kent State, I find a deeper irony in that because of the 4 students that were killed as a protest of the Vietnam War. That student that you're looking at, I think his name is Bill Campbell, if I'm not mistaken. He was ROTC walking across the campus to go to his class. He was not even involved in that. Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you. Should I send you my email or how?
Yeah. If you, when you redo that other thing, when you redo the email, when you send the email back, because you're doing the essay, right?
No, I'm not. Not.
Oh, you're not. Okay. Shoot, shoot the email back that you gave, and then we'll
Okay.
get it to you. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you,
I'm-
Susie. Thank you, John,
bet.
and thank you, Donna. Awesome.
You're welcome. I'm going back. I don't know if
You're
Tracy
welcome.
is still on. Tracy, if you're still here, you had typed in the chat box earlier. You had typed in, need ideas on how to celebrate remotely. Are you still here, Tracy? I don't know if Tracy has left the conversation.
Yeah, she might have.
Okay. Any ideas just out there? And because she may go back and listen to the recording.
Well, I know one that's, I was just jotting that down, but there was a lot of chatter about, hey, we're not that great with celebrations. And Julie was thinking, hey, what about brainstorming some ways that you have done some remote celebrations? It's a little trickier sometimes, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
One thing that-
Casey says she had to run. She's my mom. I'll tell her.
Yeah. I think one way maybe even just to celebrate the most creative way of that somebody came up with on their own to show that they understood a concept, that they got it, and maybe to start off a morning meeting or something like that, or even share it out if you're not doing live. You know, everybody here's our great one of the day. And, you know, it wouldn't have to be a different assignment every day. You could give them a long-term assignment like what we're doing here. And then just choose one every day to send out with the kids. Keep a little tally of which ones you've used from each of your students. And if some haven't given you something saying, hey, I'd really like to use something from you. Do you think you could be the most creative person of the day on your response, whether you interviewed a parent or you sang a song or you did a dance to it or something.
And look at the last two, Stacy. Hey, do a spotlight on your Google Classroom. That would carry a lot of weight right there. Hey, how do I do that? Okay. Leave the voice message on Seesaw.
Seesaw,
Love
yeah.
that, a voice message. Yeah.
Yeah, and teachers are doing exactly what John said, and they're kind of featuring that student, and sometimes depending on your circumstances, sometimes the kids themselves actually get to share something and share their learning. Yesterday we had a teacher who's beginning her class with a certain starter, and some of the kids are sharing out. It's a particular prompt that she provides them beforehand.
Wonderful. Hey, John, we did have a side conversation while you were going. You started it though, and it had to do with the Zoom breakout rooms.
I see that now. I'm going to bow to the experts.
Man, I know every district doesn't allow it because
wonderful.
there's no supervision. They are amazing.
They're
And
super
they
easy.
can be structured. They're super easy to do. You can pop in on them and they know it. See, they're not going to get too far. And if it's task oriented, they're coming back with a product. They're coming back with something. You can use the polling features, even the yes and no, the whiteboards, that you can get really, really interactive with Zoom. Absolutely. Thrown out a lot of good ideas, and participants on these webinars have come up with phenomenal ideas. This doesn't have to be the end either. If you want to get in touch with us, you do get that follow-up email and whatnot. Let us know. Reach out to us if there is something that you would want us to coach you through or mentor you through, or just think through even more. We're here. That's why we got these started.
Thank you. Thanks, Susie, for saying that, because I do encourage you when you have a moment, and I know those are few and far between, but to look at the lessons on the CitizenU website, because they are adaptable. And if you have a question on how to adapt it for a specific idea or a lesson you want to run in your class, we will provide you support on that. Because again, it is part of our goal is to get teachers using the digital Library of Congress primary sources, and to use primary sources in their teaching. So we want to help you in any way we can.
And like Julie said, review and make suggestions on the site. Yeah. John, do you have any pearls of wisdom to leave us with?
Well, the only thing I was going to say is I went back to the 5 keys to empowering students up on my screen, and I was just wondering if anybody had any comments or suggestions that they might want to share in order to. We talked a little bit about celebrate, but any of the other 5 keys that you might want to offer some insights into how we could get better at that.
You know, Jen, if I can add the one on failure, which I think is so important for kids, there's a great TED Talk again by Carol Dweck around the Not Yet School, which is here in Chicago. And I always use this with my pre-service teachers, but when we're having students try something new, allowing them to fail, instead of giving them a this is good or this is bad, it's always you give them feedback that says it's not yet there or it's there. And so Carol Dweck does this whole thing on growth mindset. It's a great little talk if you're wondering how to give feedback and giving kids the confidence to fail. That really works well.
Jason, I
Vecchio.
see you're on there. You had asked a question for me, but it was in the private chat about something about assessing your 8th graders. Did you want me to just respond to you personally, or did you want to talk about it?
Sorry.
Hi, Jason. So yeah, can you elaborate a little bit on your question for me? And then maybe we can get some help from everyone.
Sure. So I happen to be teaching a unit on the Vietnam War, as you lectured on. And it's just interesting because I've tried a lot of different modes as far as assessing student skill. And we talk about celebrating students, and we talk about trusting them and understanding their failures, giving them time, and of course, supporting them. So when I give them their assessments, they do pretty well. I celebrate this with them quite often. I take a minimal amount off. Let's say if they miss something, I've tried written assessments online, and I've tried using Google Apps, of course, during this time to assess those. And I like to mix them up. I like to give them options. I like to have them look at a primary source and a secondary source, let's say, and maybe a political cartoon, and pick an answer to support what they want to talk about. This would be like the written portion of the social studies test. Let's just say. So I'm just wondering if there's any other ways to stratify this or to change this up, especially as I'm venturing to try and finish my book, quote unquote. I'm trying to get to 2015 or 2016 or heck, maybe even tomorrow. I'd like to get them through the book since we've got the time online. My classes sworn an oath to me, as they say they'll do it. So I'm just wondering what kind of assessment methods you might have in this regard.
There's some, it's funny you would ask that, Jason. I was telling John, I just did an assessment webinar before this around assessing in remote teaching. And I don't know if you were in on the first webinar or second webinar we did around the R2D2 method, but there's a plethora of assessments, all from students creating a voice recorder of a think aloud to students doing a video of themselves, recognizing something from history, to students doing their own kind of case study around picking an element of history and then dissecting it. So then the other thing, I think if you look back to that PowerPoint, in the chart around R2D2 are listed a bunch of assessment tools that can be really helpful and creative, and not only get you through the book, but have students really feel like they want to engage with the content, and they'll remember it more meaningfully.
Right.
Jason, the other thing I was thinking about, and I'm just going back to assessments, and again, I'm not teaching a class right now of middle school teachers or middle school students rather. So, you're on the front line and probably more than me. But I would personally, I would try to keep it to if I was going to do the Vietnam War, I would try to keep it to the broader concepts that I want kids to know. So for instance, I might say the time during the Vietnam War was a time of tremendous conflict. How would you like to show me that you understand what the conflict was and what it was about, and which side you would be on the conflict. So in that case, now you could give them some suggestions, or they could say, you know what, I'd really like, I listened to Ohio and I'd really like to write my own song on that. Or one of the things I investigated was the draft. And what I'd really like to do is write an essay on what it would feel like to be an 18-year-old facing the draft during that war. Or I'd like to pretend I was Richard Nixon, and what would I feel like I needed to do if there was a war going on and there was protesting and I felt like I was losing the country here. And I think that then I would say, what do you want to do? How do you want to best let me know that you understand this concept?
Let me throw another one out at you that I think would work really well right now. We've got folks in veterans homes right now, and they're pretty lonely, and their lives have been interrupted too. You could probably call one and ask, and call ahead of time and say you've got some students that you'd like to connect to some, and they could probably match you up and just let them talk and come back and say, hey, what did you learn from them that wasn't anything that you read, that we didn't do through the book or anything? And you can take it from there. You could take it any way you needed to too. But I think that would be kind of a firsthand account.
Mm-hmm. And the reason I say that, Jason, is I think in these times you're probably going to be okay, or I would be okay if 60% of what I was hoping kids would learn they will do. The standard test that we're giving kids and that sort of thing probably isn't going to work any more than the standard evaluation of teachers during this time. We have to kind of make adjustments for where people are at, where kids are at, and what's the most important things we'd like them to take away a year from now. Did that help at all, Jason?
Someone's dog thought so.
That's me.
Okay.
The male lady's here. My dog will lose his mind, and I don't blame him, because I kind of lose my mind every time somebody walks past my door these days too.
That was really good timing, John.
So my dog may be announcing the end of this session. If anybody else has anything that they'd like to bring up, speak now, or we shall bring this to an end.
Or contact us and send us an email. Send one to Julie Chall, who I sent you all a link. Contact us via the website if you can't find that email. As John and Donna and Susie and Sheila have told you, we definitely want to continue to provide you with resources, so let us know what you need.
And thank you all. You've been fantastic. It's been a great pleasure for me to be a part of all of this, and I'm wishing you all the best in the future, and stay safe, stay well.